Today's lecture is meant to expose you to what I think really are the fundamental basics of human health. Everything that it is that make us, these human beings, healthy are what I call the sum of our inputs. We have dietary inputs, we have emotional inputs, we have supplementary inputs, we have relationship inputs. So whatever really strikes you guys in terms of little tidbits of information to adopt for yourself if something resonates, that's what I hope for. And secondly, if something kind of gives you an aha moment when you think of a specific practitioner or professional that resonates with any of these topics, hopefully it gives you some more ways of connecting with them, communicating with them, helping them and their patient base out. And it also will give you guys some insights as to how we can have some specialized calls and conversations with doctors in the future with Jason or myself. So without further ado, I'm going to make sense of this at the end. So I thought, what are the different aspects of human health? Well, I think fundamentally human health is really what I call the sum of light, water, magnetism, molecules, emotion, and human consciousness. Jason, are you able to add in or anything, or are you just sign language today? Absolutely nothing. He's just listening. Yes? Okay.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Yes. There we go.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Had a little technical glitch there.
Oh, yeah. So Jason's going to jump in as per usual on this process. So Jason, if you want to add anything to setting the tone for this talk or anything with my little equation or formula here, please go for it.
Okay. Well, I just think you nailed it right on the head. I just couldn't think of anything other than maybe adding enzymes. Well,
that's part of, yeah, exactly. Those are in the molecule section.
Right,
so
right.
we'll get into that because enzymes fit into the whole picture. So guys, what is healthy living? We hear of all of these things that we should do. We should eat a balanced diet. What the hell does that mean? We should exercise. What kind of exercise? Oh, we should meditate. Oh, I hate meditation. Be positive. Why? The world sucks. Connect socially, but I'm stuck at home in quarantine. Manage yourself, but I have too much to do. Find spirituality or religion. Which one? I want to be independent, but I'm afraid. And obviously I want to age well, but I feel like shit. Oh, I swore, sorry. So that kind of is the mess that is this current conundrum of humanity. A while back, I had this insight that there's a lot of patterns in the world. And if you look at the overall health of our planet right now, what would you say the health status of our planet is from an environmental perspective? We have raging forest fires, we have natural disasters, we have air that's not quality. So if we come from the planet, I think the health status of the planet is a really good proxy for the health status of the average human who walks the planet. We are connected to it. So what's essentially going on is we're trying to make all these movements to heal the planet, but we're not doing anything to heal ourselves as people from a societal level. When we start to heal ourselves and then help heal others, the planet will fall in tow because everything really is patternistic. I think everyone's seen this before, right? So I want to set the tone of what happens to our physical health. I don't mean to reduce us down to nothing, but we are a group of cells. And when you put a group of cells together, you get a tissue. There's only 4 major tissues in the body, and everything is organized specifically to become an organ. So the cells of a heart are different than the cells of a liver in terms of how they're constructed, but fundamentally they're a combination of cells and tissues, which bring us to the organism. We are this complex being that's actually nothing more than a series of these components that come together. So if we know that what makes a human is a very intelligent design of how these cells are put together, well, we know what probably creates a compromised state in the human is down to the individual cell being healthy. You can only be as healthy as your individual cell. So if your cell can't make energy, that's a problem. If your cell's harboring too much of a toxic load, that's a problem. If it's missing nutrients to allow for biochemical reactions to happen seamlessly, that's a problem. So what we're doing here when we're engaging with our doctors, and anyone for that fact, if we're talking about health, is they're going to display the problem to us from an organism perspective. They're going to say, my name is blah, 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 I have this disease. My name is blah, 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 I have this feeling. That is nothing more than a manifestation of some imbalance in the organ system, thus the organ, the tissues, back to the cells. Someone who's sick has fundamental problems with the cellular health inside of their body. And we're using all of our tools so that the body can regenerate its own cellular function, so it can regenerate its own health capacity. Does that make sense as a concept, guys? We're trying to reverse engineer the problem back to the fundamental health of the cell, because all cells have the same basic requirements, right? We have macronutrients. We need peptides in the form of different amino acids. We need lipids, which are fats. We need sugars, which are carbohydrates, but we also need water, oxygen, and micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and we can add in enzymes and various other herbs and constituents conditionally for that person. But water and oxygen are fundamental, because if we don't have all of those structural components there, all the functional components become compromised. Well, what do I mean by functional? Well, cells need to traffic things in and out. We need to get electrolytes in, we need to get energy in, we need to get toxins and waste material out. So if that's not working properly, then our cells might be starving or becoming too toxic. We need to maintain proper membrane voltage. Well, we need the proper water and the electrolytes and the ability to make energy. We need proper insulation. We need our cell membranes to be constructed properly from high quality fats and amino acids. We need to stay hydrated. I guarantee you everyone here is walking around to a degree partially dehydrated, and that becomes your new normal. And I'll get into the water stuff. Hopefully it's going to blow everyone's minds. Water is so much more than just something to keep us from becoming a raisin wanting to be a grape. You know what I mean? It's not just a dehydrated fruit. Then there's specialized chemicals for specific work. If we're talking neurons, we need neurotransmitters to send messages, right? If we're talking hepatocytes, we need, phase 2 detox support in order for that liver cell to detoxify things. And then we need to make sure our cellular binding capacities are working properly. If our cells can't bind insulin properly, then we can't get energy into the cell. The cell starts to starve. And it's all showing you how it really is coming down to the fundamental concept that if the cell's not working properly, how can you expect the organism to work properly when we're looking at it globally? So everything is really communication. And this is really the foundational thing to kind of show us how we're all very interconnected. I'll use an example. Anyone here ever have a communication issue in a relationship before? Everybody. I have issues with myself. I'm in quarantine. I'm arguing with myself.
Right.
If you have communication issues, how healthy can that relationship be with someone else? The same thing is true of our body, right? All cells have different forms of communication. There's quick communication and there's slow communication. So each cell has to have the ability to communicate with itself. And they must also be able to speak with their neighboring community. If you live in a subdivision and everyone's a Democrat, you're the only Republican, you're going to have communication problems among your community, for example. The same kind of concept exists within the body, because for that cell to communicate with itself, that means the organ needs to communicate with itself. When we measure someone's biomarkers on a blood test, we're measuring markers of organ function communication. When we measure the endocrine system, when we're measuring a heart rate variability test, we're measuring how efficiently or inefficiently the body is able to communicate with itself, because a breakdown in this process creates a dis-ease of normal function. And then the body will try to compensate, and chronic compensation creates disease. Does that make sense, guys, as a concept? When the body loses the ability to communicate with itself, it will compensate as much as it can. So if someone's having a conversation with you and they're putting their fingers in their ears when you start talking, all you can do is yell and hope to God that they hear you. And after a while, maybe they will cause their own deafness by stabbing themselves in the eardrum, and then it's not possible for that person to hear ever again. That is illness. I'm making up these analogies as I go along, so if they suck, please bear with me. So we have major methods and modes of communication in the body. We have what I call fast signaling, which is our nervous system. We have our central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and in health, this is kind of what's always looking at the body from an overarching perspective and responding immediately to acute changes. So an example of the nervous system would be if you get into an argument with someone and you raise your sympathetic nervous system, that's your physiology responding to an external stress. So I call that directing traffic. It's going to be instantaneous. And if the signal of chronic stress is being experienced consistently enough, well, that person or that body's physiology is going to respond and start to compensate. The slow system is what I call the endocrine system, and indirectly the immune system, because it's following the ability to communicate based upon what the nervous system is doing. So our hormones are ways of our organs communicating with different cells. When we eat carbohydrates, our pancreas needs to release insulin so we can take that energy in and we can absorb it properly. You know, when we go through puberty, we release sex hormones to allow for cellular characteristic differentiations between male and female hormones. So if we have chronic systemic changes in response to the acute, the fast system, and chronic, the slow system, we see that why someone's communication breakdown is inevitable. So if you can look at early warning signs of someone's health based upon looking at blood tests, functional lab markers, and specific non-biochemical tests like heart rate variability or different scans to see where someone's health status is. So hopefully you can catch them in the midst of this. This is all that we're really doing in alternative health and functional medicine. We're testing people to see where the breakdown in the normal functions of their human physiology is or are, and we're trying to intervene at the right level so we can restore or reverse engineer the problem or process that's in development. Because when someone develops cancer, that doesn't happen in a week. When someone develops a chronic degenerative disease, that might be 3 years or 30 years in the making before it manifests itself as a symptom. What we're trying to do is catch people before they've gone too far and they're relying upon pharmaceuticals and the modern medical system, which is just going to manage their symptoms until they die. I hate to say it. It's what it is. It's what I've seen with so many people in my world and my family. And true health is not blocking a mechanism or upregulating another one. It's figuring out how to bring the body back to a state which it can recognize, communicate, and operate with itself under normal circumstances. And if anyone want to add anything or ask any questions about that before I move on, because that was probably one of the most complex pieces of this whole thing. Also gives me a moment to take a drink.
All right.
Frank, I have a quick question with the thought of the insulin part. You mentioned that if insulin doesn't get into the cell, then you don't have energy.
Correct.
My question is, how does the sun fiber play such a huge role in that?
Well, if we're talking about things that block energy from being receptive to the body, if the body has the inability to burn energy because of some kind of inflammatory insult, if that is coming from something related to the GI system, which connects to the nervous system, the endocrine system, everything, your body will reject energy when it's excessively toxic to it. What I mean by that is, if I can only burn 50 units of energy and I eat 200 units of energy, I have to do something with that excess. So if my body's too inflamed to burn more energy, I'm going to store that energy in the form of body fat because it's a fail-safe mechanism. If I, via working with someone who's a practitioner or take it upon myself to find ways to restore my health, if I lower my inflammation, I can remove my problem of energy toxicity. I can now take in 200 units of energy and burn 200 units of energy because I've restored metabolism in my cells. Does that make sense, Larry? As a concept?
Yes, it does. But yes.
Okay, so if someone's taking sun fiber and they start to re-engineer their microbiome in terms of building healthier microbes, which make healthier metabolites, which bring down inflammation and restore gut communication via signaling everywhere else in the body, then all of a sudden my insulin resistance, which was not an insulin problem, but an inflammation problem, will go away. I would just be careful to say that all insulin resistance will be resolved by sun fiber. That is, right. It's a complex system that you're putting something into the system to induce a change. And if that change results in less inflammation, then the mitochondrial system in the body that takes energy from food and turns it into energy, ATP, actually can restore itself because inflammation will slow down your metabolism.
And there's also an adrenal component. Sun fiber helps the body store fluid inside the colon, and that will take that responsibility off the adrenals, where the adrenals don't have to spend so much of their energy focusing on that. So it's just another roundabout way to think of it.
Yeah, I mean,
when we take a global, yeah.
The concept of energy is so, because the body can only make so much energy. So the body will repartition where it's utilizing energy based upon what it needs to do. If you're a ball of inflammation, energy is going to go to the immune system. And less energy is going to go to your cells for being able to exercise or be, vibrant and healthy and feel good. So what you're doing is you're helping the body redistribute energy based upon restoring better communication and better working order to broken body systems. It's probably the better way of what I was trying to say earlier.
I like the way you put it though. If I eat a candy bar, toxic energy, the body can't afford to let me burn it for energy, so it's going to store it just until I can get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't have the capacity to have that much carbohydrate and sugar clear my system properly. So, well, if I can't burn it, I got to store it, because you violate the first law of thermodynamics if it just evaporates. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It's just continuously converted. And it's shared among all these body systems, and all these body systems have to work seamlessly and in an integrated fashion, which comes back to the concept of communication, because people who die of natural causes, which is very rare nowadays that a coroner even puts that on a coroner's report, are people whose bodies just naturally live out their lifespan, and it's their time rather than something artificially limiting their time because of a disease that causes the breakdown and imminent dysfunction of an organ or a body system. It's really what we're trying to do. But here's the issue, right? So now that we've talked about what happens, what's the process of disease, we are moving so quickly as a species. We are integrating with technology in a way we never have before. We're living in environments that we've never been exposed to before. We're dealing with situations and circumstances that we've not been exposed to for very long. It's partially what's making us sick. And I want to introduce this topic because, yes, health products and supplements are what we do, it's what we sell, and they are essential elements in piecing this puzzle back together. But there are so many other things that I feel are necessary knowledge, and in this case, added value to everyone here, in addition to added value when it comes to speaking to your doctors, because even though our physiology hasn't changed a lot in a few 100,000 years, thank goodness human beings are adaptable. So if we understand how to offset all the things that are making us sick, we can do a lot about this health crisis or this conundrum. Jason, anything to add to that?
No, you're on a roll, man.
All right, we keep going.
Stay in the zone.
Okay, so I came up with this little rhyming scheme because I don't care who you are, rhyming is easier to remember than not rhyming. So this is my little story that we can tell little children. So what's happening to us as humans? Well, the breakdown of self-regulation leads to the dysregulation of cellular communication. It's the weakening of energy generation, like I just talked about with you, Larry, which leads to the lack of waste elimination. Cell gets toxic. That, in conjunction with the deficiency of nutrient assimilation and the excess environmental stimulation, leads to the absolute loss of compensation, which brings us to our final destination. That's illness in a children's rhyme. And I don't know if Dr. Seuss is looking for some new material, but I'll pitch that. And I'll try to create a book that's not so morbid and depressing. Okay. Before we get into examining all the different areas of life that fit into my little human formula, does anyone want to add anything or jump in whatsoever? Any questions?
I have a question, Roland. While you're going through this presentation, can you highlight the glutathione and the DPP-4 and its benefit when taking it in the evening when it comes to some of the things that we've read in the article from Great Plains Labs?
Why don't we leave that to the end? Because I don't have this is more like 30,000 foot view today, a little bit different. We're going to get back to obviously the regularly scheduled programs. But today's a little bit more of a conceptual framework. If you ask me that at the end, Jason and I would happily do so.
Sure. Well, one other thing I think we could even put into your formula, which maybe is a fraction of the cells, is the microbes and how interconnected they are, not only between the health of our gut, but the health of our planet. We know now that, the microbiome of the soil is just being decimated by things like Roundup and environmental toxicity. And that if we had a healthy microbiome in the soil, we could emit as much carbon emissions as we wanted, and they would all be pulled down. So it also just kind of showed, yes, how there was such a link between the just such a link between everything. So,
True. Well, how many people are walking around with a healthy microbiome nowadays?
right.
And how
Or
many?
how much
how many-
soil has healthy microbes in it, you know?
Exactly. It's all fractalized patterns. It's all
Yeah.
interconnected. And that's what I
Yeah.
really want to get across today as a concept. I'm going to try to round it out at the end. I'm going to go through these ones a little more quickly than what I did before, but we can always come back to this on another day. You guys want to give me a call and talk to me about any of these things, I'd be happy to, because I'm, living a solo existence right now. So light and circadian rhythm. Well, why does that matter? This is probably one of the most fundamentally important concepts for humans, because everything in our body is governed by light and dark cycles. How we're designed is so incredible. So we have a clock in our brains. We actually have a clock in our brains that coordinate our physiology, knowing what time of day it is, and thus when to coordinate everything to happen. Everything is governed by light. So we have these specialized cells in our retina called the retinal pigmented epithelial cells, and their entire job is to absorb light frequency and transmit those frequencies to the brain. Once the brain receives these signals, it's information. So in the middle of the day, we experience ultraviolet light, we experience infrared light, we experience blue light, and all of those stimulatory light frequencies encourage our bodies to be more energetic. In the evening time, what amount of light are the human beings meant to experience when the sun goes down? Whatever the moon emits. But what do we do to our environments? Well, let's turn on the overhead lights. Oh shit, that's expensive on the energy. Well, let's put in high efficiency bulbs.
Right.
Let's fall asleep in front of TV watching Netflix in bed while I'm on my phone. Guys, if we do not control our circadian rhythm, you cannot get optimally healthy. Everything in the body is coordinated to happen at a certain time of day. For example, 60 or 70% of all world records in the Olympics happen between 12 p.m. noon and 4 p.m. because that's when the body and the nervous system is most ready to perform at an optimal level. If you don't allow the proper circadian rhythm to cycle, well, I mean, the Chinese body clock has been around for 2,500 years. So our organs don't properly cycle through their yin and yang relationships, not to be overly cliche, but for every high energy state, there needs to be a recovery state. So if we're not regulating our circadian rhythm, we're not going to regulate our physiology. So, Raphael asked a question, well, why glutathione in the evening? Well, the evening time is when the body's in a recuperation mode. So if we're taking something to help clear out inflammatory proteins and inflammatory compounds from the system, we're working with the immune system to help detoxify our blood and our body, so to speak, while we sleep. But if we don't get the right light frequencies, we don't get into the right phases of sleep. And as a society, we've been conditioned to fear the sun because the sun is going to roast us alive. It's not like the sun does anything to sustain life whatsoever. But the nice thing is we have a lot of different elements to offset what we can't fix about our environment. We cannot walk around in the dark in our houses in the evening. It is ridiculous to expect that of someone. But there are these glasses that you can wear that can block those light signals that are inappropriate from getting into your eyes in the evening. There are devices that you can use in the wintertime. It's cold outside. There's snow on the grass here. I came from Florida a week and a half ago. I'm looking at snow. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. But there are devices like a red light device or a vitamin D lamp or specialized light bulbs that rather than having a very biased frequency of light, they're more full spectrum. So our bodies are getting what the sun would give us naturally based upon what our physiology is adapted for. So the first part of the story is getting our circadian rhythm right. If we don't regulate our light dark cycles, if we don't get light in the morning, if we don't block light in the evening to some degree, light is phototoxic. It is actually a carcinogenic compound. So if we want to make ourselves sick, expose ourselves to those high efficiency, very, very bright lights that is really good for the budget and the pocketbook when it comes to energy efficiency, or stay in front of a computer well after the sun has gone down. The signal that your body receives is it's the middle of the day. I'm going to lower melatonin, I'm going to raise cortisol, and I'm going to dysregulate my entire scope of physiology because I would rather watch Netflix or do work in midnight than sleep. So the second thing is water. And people think, oh, big deal. Water is not important. I have had some of my greatest client successes simply just changing people's water, because water is not just water in the body. By volume, we're what, 73, 75% water, but by molecular compound or molecular summation, we're about 99% water inside a cell. And water inside the body is not water inside a glass. Have you ever wondered why you cut your skin open? Yes, you will bleed, but why doesn't water drip out of your skin in addition to blood, for example? The water in our bodies is actually structured very differently. I'm not going to run through this too quickly, but I want to introduce this idea. There's a guy named Dr. Gerald Pollack. I interviewed this guy years ago. He's this wonderful researcher from Washington, Seattle. And he accidentally discovered that water can become a battery when you have energy running through the water. So we're taught that water has 3 phases: ice, liquid, and vapor. He found a 4th phase of water called an exclusion zone. And basically what he discovered is, in the right situations and circumstances, when you put water next to a surface that loves water and you run light through that water, the water becomes a battery. The negative charges and the positive charges separate, and it can conduct energy all by itself. So the reason I bring this up is, if anyone knows their cellular metabolism here, the inside of a cell loves water, right? The outside of a cell doesn't like water. The inside of a cell has a little energy factory called the mitochondria, which generates light and heat. Healthy people likely have different kinds of water in their systems. Healthy people also need to drink different kinds of water in order to maintain that. So here's an example. The top little graph shows water next to a surface that loves water. And that little EZ is that zone that separates charge and acts like a battery. When you add light frequency to that, it quadruples in size. So the difference is, when you add the right kinds of light to water, you create the ultimate conduction of electricity, which creates the ultimate battery. And this is a quote directly from Dr. Gerald Pollack. Charged entities such as membranes, proteins, and DNA all interface with water. Exclusion zones should appear in abundance. Exclusion zone is that specially charged water that acts like a battery. It basically means they carry electrical potential. Since nature rarely discards available energy, exclusion zone charge may be used to drive diverse cellular processes ranging from chemical reactions in the body all the way to how fluid flows. I like how Missy just took a sip of water on cue. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do here is to maintain human health. A huge thing is how energy and water flows in the body to create blood flow and lymphatic flow and detoxification. Same thing with how water conducts electricity to make nerves communicate. So what does this really mean? Well, it means that water is not really water. And one path to regenerating your health is looking at the kind of water you are drinking. If someone is drinking tap water, that's actually, unfortunately, some of the worst water on the planet. And so many clients and doctors are so steeped into these deep biochemical mechanisms of this specialized supplement, this nanoglutathione, this device, but they drink tap water, or they have a Brita filter, or they have something so basic that when you drink tap water, you're drinking compounds like fluoride ions and various other antimicrobial things that they have to treat the water with because it's so absolutely dirty. That last thing there, water should be absolutely free of dissolved solids that disrupt health. Metals and environmental compounds are always getting into our natural waterways, which is why we need to actually filter our water in the first place, and full of dissolved solids which aid in health and function. Things like naturally occurring ions, electrolytes, because these are meant to actually bring healthy, clean water into our bodies so we can basically dispose of the dirty water. So my order of operations I always give with my own clients is, if you can find true spring water that is either filled at the source or comes in a glass bottle, that's the best thing, because that water is not only charged by the sun, it's filtered through different kinds of trace minerals. That is the cleanest water you can drink. And then you can go down the order of operations and you can see, like, tap water is one up from pond water, in my opinion. So one of the most important things you can do, given how much water drives different physiologic chemical or different physiologic reactions in the body, is invest in making sure that your water is of good quality, or else you're going to be bringing in things that your body needs to process and ultimately will disrupt that communication. You have something, Jason?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you pass water through a typical pipe, within 12 to 20 feet, it comes completely depolarized. Because if you think about it in nature, where good spring water comes from, it's going to come up and it's going to be up, constantly moving. And that pulls the slope angle and keeps the water polarized. So even drinking super clean water that doesn't become restructured or just put through like a motion device, it still is going to be depolarized. And I also with water and enzymes, and enzymes are all water activated. So I've had tons of clients, they're like, these enzymes don't work for me, or they give me an upset stomach, or, I've had a reaction to them. And just by increasing their amount of healthy water, those things just seem to, go away like 80% of the time.
Water is the universal
Yeah.
solvent. It conducts everything. So if the water in your body is not right, you will never get healthy. This is
disobeys the laws of thermodynamics, the only substance we know of that does it.
Exactly. So water plus light, you get those two right, everything else gets better. Now we're moving to nutrition. And this is the most polarized area in health, and it in some ways drives me crazy, but I try to manage. Important concepts when it comes to food, right? The first thing is the food we eat becomes what our cells and communication molecules are made of. I'll change the spelling error there, my bad. So the entire ecosystem determines on the health status of our food. What does the average American person eat? Well, I just spent 6 months there. It's no really different than Canada, but no one really thinks about Canada. Everything is convenience food. Everything is fast food for the most part, right? We're so divorced from where our food comes from. And most people don't even know that where the food is grown determines its nutritional value. If there is no health in the soil, if there are no minerals in the soil, then there's no health in the food. How you cook or prepare the food impacts the nutritional status as well. If you boil vegetables until they're mush, what color does the water become? It takes on the color of the vegetables, which is the nutrition that has been leached out of that food. And the last thing is how we eat the food determines how well we assimilate it, because Mr. Thurston always likes to say, we're not what we eat, we are what we eat, what we digest, and what we assimilate. And if you eat that food in a rushed, stressed state or watching some awful, cop show on Netflix, we're not going to digest that food properly, because the human being needs everything that comes from food. Amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Those are all needed for the hierarchy of what our human body requires to maintain health. So our macronutrients are what contain energy. They also build structural elements. Like, you can't build muscle without amino acids. You can't build cell membranes without fatty acids. And micronutrients are typically there for not only structural activity, like there's a lot of calcium in bone, for example, there's a lot of phosphorus and different electrolytes in cells, but every reaction in the body needs a vitamin or a mineral cofactor. This is why astrazyme exists in our enzymes, because if you don't have the cofactor, you can't rely on that chemical reaction to happen properly. And when it comes to diet, Jason and I have spoken about this. Everyone wants to play for a team. I'm on team keto. I'm on team paleo. I'm on team vegan. That's not about health. That's about belonging. And people go through their dogmatic phases in life, but diet should not be dogmatic, because the formula is very simple. If we are not well, we have to consider our food selection. If we are not well, you cannot out-supplement a poor diet. So what I tell people and clients, if it grows or it eats something that grows, it was designed for you to eat. There is no candy bar bush. I hate to say it, there's no place in the world where soda flows from the high mountains. All these things are metabolic poison designed out of convenience or designed for, unfortunately, the development of addiction. How hard is it to make that meal right there? I mean, it doesn't take a lot of culinary acumen to slice an avocado, to roast some sweet potatoes, and to poach a few eggs and put it on a bed of greens. Doing this alone will make a massive impact, because you can see this is layered now. If we get the light and the circadian rhythm right, if we get the water right, we get the nutrition right, we're slowly putting in all the things that our body in its infinite wisdom knows what to do with. So what are the healthy sources of the foods that we need to be eating? Well, if it's from a proteinaceous source, we want food that's grass-fed if it's meant to graze on grass. If it's meant to run around in a field, free-run chickens or free-run eggs. If it's meant to swim in a sea, hopefully that's not in a fish farm, wild-caught seafood. And Larry, I'm still waiting for my elk steaks, just saying, because wild game is very healthy. Because why? It's away from the modernization of industrial farming. Fats are another thing. People do not understand fats. Fats are so important, not only from an energy perspective, but every cell in the body is constructed of different kinds of fatty acids. They're communication molecules. They maintain brain function. They maintain nerve conductivity. And we have been told a huge lie about fat. People say, stay away from saturated fat. It will clog your arteries. It's not how it works. Saturated fat is just solid at room temperature. Most of the fat your body stores is a saturated fat. It just depends on where it comes from. High quality animal fat, coconut, butter, these are healthy oils because they don't become toxic when you cook them. And your body will burn them for energy, providing your cells are healthy. Monounsaturated fats, again, they have a different molecular composition to them, but the ones that I recommend most to people are real high quality olive oil. If a bottle of olive oil isn't in glass and at least $20, it's probably not real. Avocados, raw nuts and seeds. And again, animal fat has a high quantity of monounsaturated fat in it, which is healthy for you. Then there's the polyunsaturates, the nuts and seeds, again, omega-3s, omega-6s, what we get from seafood in the form of EPA, DHA. We need these for very specialized functions, but we should not overdo omega-3s and omega-6s because they can become very fragile very quickly. And if anyone here is using what I call the toxic oils, canola oil, corn oil, sunflower, safflower, answer me this. When we hear the term vegetable oil, what vegetable is in vegetable oil? This is the biggest crock of shit on the market. They put a label of all these, you can't squeeze a cucumber and get oil out of it. It is like 95% water. Vegetable oil is seed oil. It is toxically refined, deodorized, and almost hydrogenated seed oil that will make your body inflamed just by the very virtue of it being consumed in your system, because it changes the structural components of how your body makes cell membranes. And like I said, if we don't have proper cell membrane construction, we don't have proper cellular communication, and things can't go in and out of our cells properly, so the cell becomes compromised. Then there's the carbohydrates, root vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes. Again, some people can do them, some people can't. It's very much individualized. Ideally, we live in a world where someone doesn't get sick when they eat a chickpea. In my mind, that's a sign that someone's body is really unable to tolerate, any kind of compounds in foods that may be too immune stimulating. Then there's cruciferous and leafy vegetables. If we ate this way as humans, we would greatly increase our vitamin and mineral load. We would greatly increase our nature-derived enzymatic load. We would greatly reduce blood sugar. We would greatly reduce inflammation, and we would greatly increase our nutritional status. All necessary pieces of the puzzle for the regeneration and restoration of health. And health practitioners, I have traveled with many of them over the last 6 months, and I just watch how people eat. And health practitioners are the most guilty people on the road in terms of what food choices they are making. You cannot out-supplement a bad diet. I will leave it at that because I think Jason may want to jump in and add something.
Yeah, well, it seems like the higher level speaker that you go to out to dinner with eats the crappiest and takes the least amount of supplements. Yeah, that's just what I've noticed.
Drinks the most wine, eats the most bread at dinner.
Right. Yeah.
And the irony of it, it's like your cardiologist lighting up a cigarette after surgery going, oh man, that was good.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, guys. And that's what we're so steeped in functional medicine details and mechanisms and all that. And we forget that when was the last time I ate something that didn't get to me on a boat from South Africa? You know what I mean? Like, we're not eating food the way food was intended. And then, that kind of breeds into the next thing, being on the circuit, traveling a lot. Your environment makes a massive difference. Like, looking at this photo, I went to World's End State Park with Jeff Thurston, and we didn't quite have this, but we had something close. And we both sat with our feet in the creek for about an hour and didn't say anything to each other until we finally looked at each other, nodded, and I was like, okay, it's time to go. That day, I literally felt like my entire body just relaxed and loosened up. Why? Well, because the environment is connected to us. We are yoked to our environments physiologically, energetically. So we have clean, charged water that you're swimming in that doesn't necessarily have, downstream runoff. The air is rich with oxygen. We don't have, the fingerprints of industry. We don't have compounds of manufacturing that have found their way into the environment. We have natural electromagnetic fields. The earth has a pulse called the Schumann resonance. And when you take your socks off and you touch the earth, you absorb that pulse, which affects the degree of negative charge, negative being a positive thing or a beneficial thing in your body. So it's why you feel so good when you're in the forest or why you lie on the beach. You charge your body naturally. You're also getting full spectrum light, and it's quiet and it's an expansive space. It doesn't feel like the world is closing in on you when, like it does when you're walking in the core of a downtown city center. And it's proven that walking in nature alone can lower cortisol levels. So, that's not a supplement, but in a way it kind of is becoming one, because how often do we actually get to do that? We don't. We live in this stuff. And the more you live in these environments, I do believe that you need to make time to find its complementary opposite, to balance out the yin and the yang. Why? Because there's so many man-made electromagnetic fields, and this is why the hedron stuff is good. Has anyone ever tried to pull open their Wi-Fi on their cell phone when they're in a condo building? Next time you're in a condo building, pull open your Wi-Fi and just count the number of networks that you can connect to.
47, like every 2 seconds they changed.
Exactly. And those things, if we can only see the visible light spectrum. We can see from red to blue light. If you could see electromagnetic spectrum energy, the entire sky would be covered with waves, and our bodies are interacting with those things. So that's one stress. Environmental pollutants. A city is full of it. And the worst part about it is the air quality in the city outside is still better than the air quality of your home, unless you actually add some proper air filtration. So chronic indoor living becomes that. And then there's city stress. You walk around in the city, people are mean mugging all the time. They don't have happy looks on their faces. They're like, they look through you and they bounce off of you with their shoulders when you get in their way. They're drinking the municipal water, and then obviously altered full light spectrum, because cities produce electric smog that blocks some of the beneficial energy from the sun. But additionally, they have all these artificial high energy lights that are basically on all the time. Like walking around downtown Las Vegas is a massive stress to your body at 11 p.m. in the evening. So I asked people, what is your inside-outside time ratio? And how often do you truly disconnect, not only from the city, but with technology? Because our little, electronic best friends go with us every second of the day, and we're rewiring our neurochemistry and the neurologic addiction to always need to be connecting into something. That's why people have a hard time initially the first few days of vacation, because their brain hasn't caught up with their mind yet. So that's a huge thing when it comes to environment. How can you fix it? Filter your air. Get a really good quality HEPA filter, or a multitude of what I call a Stonehenge of HEPA filters set up in your house. Why? Because the air is an essential part of what our body has to filter using our lungs on a chronic basis. And air and oxygen is essential making energy. I saw a really good post yesterday that said people are walking around neurotic about wearing masks when their air filter looks like this. And it was just an air filter covered in absolute shit, just tons of dirt and dust. And I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I lived in a condo and I had 3 HEPA filters, and in 6 months, those filters had collected enough for me to physically pull off of the filter medium. So if you're not filtering your air, like we've talked about, restore the light in your building, get the proper light bulbs for the room that you spend the most time in. Don't turn on overhead lights after the sun goes down. Use salt lamps or bulbs that have either full spectrum incandescent frequencies or biased removal of blue. Filter your water, minimize or harmonize your EMFs. This is different for everyone, but I'm the kind of person who will turn off my router in the evening. And another thing is never put an electronic device against your bedroom wall. Anything that emits a big, powerful electric spectrum or electromagnetic spectrum, put it against the wall that faces the outside of the house. Because when you're sleeping and that device is on, or if that device is on, that is blasting you with something. So one thing that I always suggest doing is around your bedroom, do not have any kind of devices that emit or require they plug themselves into an electrical outlet. And then the last thing will be bring the Earth's magnetic field to you. I started traveling with a little pulsed EMF mat. I swear this thing saved me. I absolutely love this thing because it does a magical job of helping to knock some of the dirty EMF off of the body. So you're actively bringing in that restoration of charge back to your cells. Because if you guys remind me at the end, I'll ask a question about cancer just to pose everyone's thought processes as to there's more going on with cancer than just genetics and DNA and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I want to share just a quick little personal story about my son. And twice a week, he does these things called Jedi baths. So we have tons of different rocks and stones, and he'll go around and muscle test which ones. He'll put them in the bath with him. We'll structure the water. We'll put on the super deep meditation music. He'll test out which essential oils is going to go in the water. He'll put in either dead salt minerals or Epsom salts. And then after we get the water as hot as he possibly can stand it to get his toes in there. And then we'll soak in there for about 30, 40 minutes. And then come out and just lay in a pitch black dark room for another 30, 40 minutes. And he does that twice a week. We call it Jedi bath. So makes a big difference.
You would not believe how much energy you absorb from artificial, environmentally constructed things on a regular basis. So, you know, the weaker they make your batteries, the more you need to charge them. And Mr. Thurston, that's probably a scientific explanation as to why World's End State Park calls you as often as it does, or why we need to go on fishing trips, or why we need to go to the beach. The body just knows when it needs to clean itself out of old, dirty EMF.
Get rid of all those old bad electrons.
That's it.
That's right.
It's really what it is. Light water and magnetism. My formula becomes more and more strengthened as the presentation goes on. So then we have exercise, and exercise is an interesting one. Very simple concept here. So the human body was designed to move. So movement is force, and appropriate forces build and sustain health. What happens to the body when it's in outer space?
Loses muscle mass.
It loses everything, bone density, organ mass, because without the force of gravity and the force opposing gravity, we can't maintain our optimal health. So essentially what exercise is doing for us is it is imposing forces on the body to stimulate a stress response that becomes beneficial to us. The thing with exercise is too much of a good thing can no longer be a good thing. Exercise is dose dependent. And when it comes to exercise, you know, the best one is not necessarily a named exercise. This is kind of like the diet thing. People want to argue, oh, the best thing is Orange Theory. The best thing is this. The best thing is that. The best thing is the one that you can actually sustain without injury. Secondly, if I'm 35 years old and I'm now going to be working with someone who's 85 years old, am I going to make them do a power clean or a box jump? I might have them start walking on a flat surface, and maybe they might build up to speed walking, because all of these exercises are resistance exercises. There are so many benefits that come from exercise. Like Larry mentioned, muscle mass. Yes, a huge thing with muscle mass is muscle mass maintains metabolic function. The older you get, the less muscle you have, the more dangerous it is to be alive, because being weak makes you susceptible to falling, but it also slows down your metabolic rate, so you can't make as much energy. For me, muscle mass is like an investment account. Anything you can do to put some money away in the investment account with compound interest, you're going to be very happy you did so in the long run. The other thing is cardiac output. Exercise stimulates mitochondrial density, mitochondrial health. So it makes our bodies more efficient at converting food energy into physiologic energy. And the more we do that, the body gets the message that goes, oh, well, you're going to put me under stress on a regular basis. I'm just going to make more of these little energy factories because I need to get better at dealing with this stress of being active all the time. And the benefit to those systems is they allow our circulatory system and our lymphatic system to flow more optimally. It also strengthens the heart muscle, which really is the center of the human body, in my opinion. It can boost up energy levels physiologically. Based upon the kinds of exercise that you're doing, you can become more aerobically fit or more anaerobically fit, depending on the kind of selection. And the last thing is exercise is essential for mental health. You know, the space theory may be a little out there. What happens to a human body when it's on bed rest? You know, the lack of movement means lack of health. So a huge thing is figuring out what the right dose response of exercise is for someone, and excessive forces on the body. For example, you can break a bone doing exercise pretty easily. I thought learning to do backflips at 26 was a great idea until I shattered my fibula. And now I have a metal plate in my left leg because, well, testosterone is a stupid thing. But fundamentally, all of these elements they're little pieces of the puzzle that really start to add up. And then we get into supplementation. This is our bread and butter, so you guys have a very good basic understanding of supplementation. I want to bring some awareness to the concept of supplementation. These are the different categories of what I think the human body needs to supplement with on a regular basis. because the reason we supplement is because we can't get it from our diet. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing. It is a supplement. It is not a replacement. It is something to bring into your system to complete the missing piece of the puzzle so the whole can find itself once again. And, you know, our diet, lifestyle, environment, all those things are what are trying to provide our physiology with what it needs on a regular basis. So we can only go so long without certain vitamins and minerals because we're born with a concentration. And over our lifespans, we start to use them up when we run into what are called long latent nutrient deficiencies. So someone may be totally healthy otherwise, but they're missing B vitamins. And there'll be a period of time where those missing B vitamins can no longer catalyze the necessary reactions for energy metabolism or making hormones that they once did. Same with minerals and enzymes. I mean, we've talked about this on every single call. Enzymes are necessary for life function. They catalyze reactions in the body. Without enzymes, all these reactions would take hours, if not days or weeks to happen. They make it happen instantaneously. So these enzymes, in conjunction with the things that help maintain our body systems, as Jason mentioned before, our prebiotics, our probiotics, our postbiotics, and then sometimes herbs and special considerations like homeopathics. And I will say that medications have their place, but sometimes medications hopefully can be there as a gap bridge when we can bring order back to the system as a short-term solution. No one got sick from a deficiency of medication. So I came up with 3 major areas to approach the concept of using supplementation, right? So we use them to bridge the gap to aid in our body's ability to heal. If we're missing nutrients on a regular basis and we require those nutrients for that cell to function properly, it's not just going to happen by random chance. We need to bring them in. The second thing is to help to offset an external stressor. If we're living in a city, if we're living on the 20th floor of a condo, if we don't filter our water, if we don't have any filtration system for our air, if we eat poor quality food and we work as a lawyer downtown, that stress load is going to be very different than someone who lives and works on a farm. So we need to be able to bias our supplementation regime to what allows us to sustain our health in spite of the environment we choose to live in. And the last thing kind of dovetails from the previous. I don't feel that it's possible just to simply eat a high quality diet and drink the best water anymore and not need a supplement of some sort if you want to perform at an optimal or an enhanced state. If you're an athlete, if you perform at some extreme level, or if you're someone who runs a company and you're a high-powered CEO, whatever, you're demanding more of your physiology than someone who works a very menial job. You probably need to utilize supplementation on a regular basis, ongoingly, if you want your physiology to be able to meet the demands of the stresses of the life you choose to live. Does that statement make sense to everyone? Anything to add, Jason?
No, I just couldn't agree more that it just seems like, I don't know if you've noticed, like every 5 years that goes by, it seems like, like eating just organic just doesn't even seem to even come close to how well it worked the 5 years before.
Things are changing rapidly, but I do also want to touch on a word about supplementation, because in my travels and conversations, I always sit back and kind of look at the patterns of things. I think the health industry has used the word supplementation now in an inappropriate context. They think supplementation is cure or supplementation is resolution. What I mean by that is you take the supplement, the problem goes away. I have a fungal infestation, so I take an antifungal and then all of a sudden my problems are fixed. No, because that's not the whole part of the story. It's the signal that the supplement provides allows the body to eradicate the problem. An example, if I have a blood clot and I start taking nattokinase, nattokinase is not what fixes my blood in isolation. Nattokinase is an enzyme that dissolves protein accumulation in the arteries in the form of a blood clot in conjunction with the immune system, so you can clear out that clot and the tissue can work again. So it's not the supplement that fixes the problem. It's what the supplement provides mechanistically, systemically, that works with the body to heal and restore itself. And I think that concept is so crucial for everyone to understand, because it gives it alleviates the pressure of always having to come up with a product to fix someone's problem. Someone didn't develop cardiovascular issues because they were lacking nattokinase in the same way someone doesn't develop Parkinson's because they don't have levodopa. They develop the problem because a multitude of factors, supplements in conjunction with everything else that we've been talking about up until this point, are really what allow people to help them heal themselves with their own physiology.
If the
And
world
now-
ran the way it was designed to, we would have no reason to have a job.
Say it again.
He said if the world was, being ran the way it was designed, the original design, we wouldn't have any reason to have a job.
This is true. Yeah, we didn't need supplements back in the Paleolithic days. It was just called living.
Right.
But because of what we've done, and it comes back to that slide where I showed the evolution of man. Nowadays, these are also supplements: light, magnetic fields, sound therapy, aromatherapy, because we can utilize these in conjunction with all those other variables and dietary supplements to have a supercharge-like effect. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get what we're missing from nature when our environments can't be optimal. We can't have an optimal environment all the time living in the Western industrialized world. So getting smarter with your understanding of how supplements work, what supplements are necessary to sustain health, that's what we're really trying to help people with in the context of, the promotion of health and wellness. And on the illness side, we're understanding how the piece fits into the puzzle of what enzyme, what probiotic, what prebiotic, and the mechanisms of action behind those products, what they do for the body, and how they help in the intervention of that person finding their way back to health. And these ones are a little bit more esoteric and out there. I'm going to run through these too much. I don't want to be preachy because we all have our own philosophy when it comes to this stuff. But the more I sit with studying the concept of spirituality, whatever that means, the more I've traveled around, met people, seen different parts of the world. Never more has this become important. I'll give you an example. I went somewhere the other day, shouldn't have, but I did. And a woman saw me coming down the aisle in a grocery store, and she literally jumped into the shelf to get away from me because I was in her space. That's Canada right now. That's the insanity that we're living in. And when you segregate and isolate humans and you feed them nothing but fear and shame and guilt for their choices, that's a really fast way to get sick. So what I think and I feel right now is now's a really good time to get stock of what I call the interpersonal and the interpersonal relationships in your life. Relationships with other people, your significant other, your family, your children, if you have them, your friends, your community, and your tribe, if you will, what I mean by spiritual connection. If these things aren't strong, we can't do this whole thing by ourselves. There's an old saying I like is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And, we need to find that group. There's no coincidence that this group of people has come together to do what it is we're doing. We're all, birds of a feather trying to flock together. And within that group dynamic, there's the relationship with self-love, sense of purpose, where you are in your life, what's going on with you emotionally, because we have this tendency in the Western world to be so unbelievably distracted that we don't sit and actually take stock of all these things that are going on. I've had nothing to do but do this. This is where this slide came from in meditation the other day, when I was just sitting with what humanity is experiencing. And I thought about the concept and the context of relationships, and relationships can be a toxin. If you have a toxic relationship in your life, how is it any different from breathing toxic air or drinking toxic water? Because they have no place in your world if you truly wish to be well. And then there's a relationship with your own mind, because I don't know what everyone believes here, but I can't experience the world through any of your eyes. So I feel that if people are brave enough, because it takes bravery to see all the dirty shit that you sweep under the rug inside of your own existence, pardon my language, what occupies real estate in our minds? I call a brain a thought generator and filter, because you have these lenses that you look through. There's the gender lens, there's the familial lens, there's the societal lens, there's the socioeconomic lens. So what ones are you most often thinking of, and do they actually sync with you? What does your mind conjure up when you're not distracted? Can you sit there for half an hour and not have to check social media or watch a YouTube video or whatever? Because right now, if we don't make friends with ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, I don't think we can really express true physical health, because it's not possible to be in a physically healthy body if we have a sick mind. I've seen that in so many different people in the world. And I think this kind of dovetails into it, where we all hopefully believe in something. And if we can be respectful, accepting of the belief patterns of others, that's the huge start. Because I don't know if everyone here believes in a greater higher power. I do. We're all children of this earth, but we're all children of whatever made this. So for our own existence and to find our own freedom to be who we are, I think you need to find our own belief system that we can stand behind, both inside of us and for us, being comfortable to talk about it with some other people. And we should be hopefully able to tolerate the belief systems of others and fighting over just symbolic bullshit all the time, be it politics or religion. We still have people killing themselves over who's right about something when no one actually knows. So we all are interconnected. Like this whole world, this whole thing is interconnected. And I know it's a little woo-woo and out there, but we all came from the very thing that can take us away. And where I think we're just consciousness trying to know itself. And I have this little thing I want to end with to show that science and spirituality, I think, really are coming together, and to get people into a sense of more openness and understanding that we can be the change that we need to see. We need to know that whatever made us really does love us. So coming back to something, I'm going to tell a little story about my little human health, light, water, and magnetism, connect the dots philosophically and practically. And this story is inspired by Dr. Zach Bush, because I think this guy is awesome. And he's the kind of guy who I like how he's trying to model science and spirituality together. It's something that I've been doing myself. Jason and I have had many a conversation about this. So I want to tell a little story. It starts off with science. So do you guys know that the sun actually doesn't have any heat in the vacuum of space? Space is negative 270 degrees. And if you were to go up to the sun, you would not feel the intense heat because it interfaces the vacuum. So the sun gives off electromagnetic radiation in the form of light energy. And when that light energy hits the earth, it creates a thermodynamic relationship with the earth's atmosphere. So we feel heat. And before humans were here, this process was happening to drive this expansive, I guess we can use the term evolution, to create increasingly complex organisms. And it started with essentially the creation of plants, because they became more complex multi-celled organisms. So the sun's electromagnetic radiation hits the earth. And all of these little plants have these things in them called plastids. The most famous one we know is chlorophyll. So the heat, the light energy from the sun, is absorbed by the plants. And what it does is it excites water and carbon inside the plants to build energy-dense molecules, i.e. fats and carbs, and releases oxygen. So our environment was perfectly designed for us to have food to eat and oxygen to breathe by the interfacing between the earth, the environment, and the sun. That's pretty cool, right? And the second thing, or the third thing, is when we eat this food, rather, so we take those fats and those carbohydrates in the form of food, we take in the oxygen that the plants create, and we reverse the reaction in our bodies in the compounds, not in the compounds, in the cells via the mitochondria. Basically what we're doing when we're breaking down the food we eat is we're releasing the light energy from the carbohydrates and the fats. People don't even understand, it's in the word. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is all a fat or a carbohydrate is made of. So when light energy excites water, which is hydrogen and oxygen with carbon in a plant, you create a carbohydrate via photosynthesis. So us as humans, when we eat food, we're breaking down, or we are reversing the reaction of what the sun does when it interacts with plants. And what we're actually releasing in our body is chemical energy and light, because it's been proven that the human body actually emits light. If you were to look at us through infrared goggles, or if you were to somehow be able to create a technology that scans bioluminescence, we emit light, but our eyes just can't pick it up. So when someone says we are beings of light, that actually is a legitimate, literal saying. And as beings of light, I always say, what kind of light are you bringing into this world? Because we're starting to be able to get to the point where we can use technology to measure if someone is not able to emit light properly. And here's a really cool thing. I'll ask you guys, what are the only cells in the body that are unable to develop cancer? There's only one kind of cell in the body that is unable to develop cancer. Cardiac cells. Cancer of the heart doesn't exist. You know why that is? Because the heart's magnetic field emits so much light, and those cells are so electrochemically active that their voltage never drops to the point for cancer to be able to develop. So when someone says heart-centered, that's a massive thing, because our heart emits a frequency or a field large enough that when two people are sitting together, you're sitting in the sunshine of someone else's light emittance based upon what they ate that the sun helped create. Is that not incredible? Like, to me, that's absolutely nuts. And you can actually measure these things now. If you look at heart rate variability tests, you look at brainwave oscillations, you know, Jason's talked about Patrick Porter and brain tap. You can see the aberrant changes in the signals that are emitted by the heart based upon stress interpreted by the brain. And, you know, fundamentally, if our thoughts and emotions affect the heart's magnetic field, which affects the environment around you, whatever you're vibrating to, not only does your physiology vibrate to match in a health disease context, you're bringing that into the world around you. So you're emitting light that will affect the water of all the componentry of all the organisms within your existence. And fundamentally, healthier people emit healthier frequencies, and then they bring a different vibration into the world. So I'll end with this. Everything in science is coming along to show us that we really are just beings of light, but there's so much in that statement that we need to contextually identify from a biophysics, biochemistry, and a biological level. But let's utilize that concept to keep ourselves healthy, share the light with the world, because healthy people are the ones that change the world.